Welcome everybody to the 21st GE Energy at Lunch on the topic hydrogen and the future energy system from ambition to reality. And as you may already see, we have 5 speakers for today, and this webinar actually brings together perspectives from research, industry and policy to discuss the central question: what role should hydrogen realistically play in the energy transition? My name is Michael Buchstick. I'm a member of the board of the GE, of the German affiliate, and this Energy at Lunch is co-organized with the Swiss affiliate, the Swiss Association of Energy Economics. And we are happy to welcome you as participants and also welcome to the speakers. We will be hearing 5 short presentations from different perspectives shortly. And afterward, we will have time for a discussion. So I invite you as participants to post your questions in the Q&A. And as we have a tight schedule with 5 presentations, I propose that we get started. So the first presentation will be given by Professor Russell McKenna. He's a professor of energy systems analysis in the Department of Mechanical and Process Engineering at ETH Zurich and head of the Laboratory of Energy Systems Analysis at the Paul Scherrer Institute. So the floor is yours, Russell. You can see your screen, but the slides are not yet in presentation mode.
Second.
Yes.
Okay, good.
Perfect.
Thank you, Michael, for the introduction. Good morning and welcome to everyone from my side. I'd like to start with a bit of a plug or a bit of an introduction about the Swiss Association for Energy Economics. This is a Swiss arm of the International Association. What do we do? Well, we foster exchange between research and academia, 3 main pillars: policy, administration, and industry. And these 3 pillars are represented in the webinar today that we're pleased to be organizing with the GE again. We have student prizes once a year for master and PhD students for their best theses and chapters of their theses. We have an annual conference, and in the last few years we've been co-organizing with the GEE and with STRICE and with also the Austrian Institute, Austrian Association, this conference, International Symposium on Energy Systems Analysis. We have a student chapter active with PhD students, currently 4 of them from ETH and Uni Geneva, which organize an annual PhD seminar, and there are also prizes sponsored from BFE available there. We have webinars like this one. We have networking fairs for students and excursions. We recently had one in Zurich, and the membership is relatively affordable depending on where you live. It's 1 or 2 coffees a month, so I encourage you to get involved and look out for our events. On to the topics of today. So it's about hydrogen. It's about the role of hydrogen in the future energy system, and I wanted to start by introducing the energy compass that we're publishing from the Lab for Energy Systems Analysis at PSI. And the latest issue, the first issue this year, is all about hydrogen and how it fits into the energy puzzle. You can subscribe to this. It's a magazine in German, French, and English, digital, but also PDF sent through the post if you prefer. And in this issue about hydrogen, we looked, amongst other things, about the characteristics of hydrogen and some of the technical characteristics that maybe make it unique as one of the smallest molecules, but also challenging to use despite its versatility. Now, one of these key features is the very low volumetric energy density of this element, right? So compared to other energy carriers like natural gas, gasoline, kerosene, and methanol, it has a reasonable gravimetric energy density, but it takes up a lot of volume to store, as shown in this figure, 1 gigajoule of energy. And this makes it not so attractive, perhaps, or challenging to handle for applications like aviation or others like shipping. We're going to see later where the volume of the fuel in the storage is an issue. The second thing I wanted to highlight from this issue is that we looked at all the pathways and the different colors of hydrogen that can be produced. So green hydrogen, pink, gray, black, depending on the source and depending on the process route. So we can have electrolysis, we can have gasification with or without CCS from natural gas or from wood. And we can have pyrolysis of natural gas, and this all flows into the value chain of hydrogen, which can then be upgraded into various options and used in various sectors, ammonia in shipping and agriculture. It can be used to replace oil or fossil oil. It can be used as hydrogen in industries in different sectors, or as aviation fuels, for example. One of the recent studies I wanted to highlight in this context is this analysis of around 2,000 hydrogen projects worldwide. This is based on the IEA database of hydrogen projects. I don't want to go into the details for that. I would refer you to the paper, but essentially we analyzed these 2,000 projects and we analyzed their environmental impact, their potential environmental impact, assuming that they are realized in a business as usual scenario and in a future low carbon scenario. And we basically concluded based on this analysis that what is well known in the scientific debate, that hydrogen should be prioritized for specific sectors, in particular those that cannot be electrified. In other words, for ammonia and for iron and steel, and possibly also for aviation, there were some roles there, and the impact in terms of emission reduction potential could be significant. Otherwise, it's discouraged in sectors like mobility or personal mobility, power, and domestic heat. As I say, I don't want to dwell on the details. We're a bit short of time today. I just wanted to close with the outlook. We're currently working on a multi-criteria assessment of ranking different hydrogen applications. This was inspired a little bit by the hydrogen ladder, which you might know from Michael Liebreich, originally trying to underpin that with expert input. We've done a global survey with over 500 participants. That will be coming at the EEM conference and hopefully published as a paper soon. It's actually a global survey that we'll be presenting at the EEM, just highlights for Norway. And with that, I would pass to the next speaker. I think this is Falco, but first to Michael for a brief introduction. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much, Russell, for your presentation and your input. And yeah, as already mentioned, we will now move on to Falco Ickert. He's a professor or full professor of energy transition and climate futures at the Interdisciplinary Transformation University in Linz, Austria, and also a guest researcher at the Potsdam Institute for Climate Impact Research in Germany. And we are really looking forward to your input, Falco.
Yeah, thank you so much for the kind introduction. Looking forward, especially to the discussions, to combining the different perspectives. I decided to have a rather zoomed out perspective to reflect a bit on where we're standing with respect to hydrogen. Can you see my screen? Does that work nice? Okay, cool. And I zoom out quite a bit here, reminding ourselves basically that hydrogen was discussed already 2 times historically, for the first time in the context of the first oil crisis. And there, obviously, it was a question of, okay, energy security, energy resilience, not climate change so much. But there were like already 2 waves, and we are basically in the 3rd wave of hydrogen discussions. It's a more substantial wave now, but the big question is how do we stabilize this wave and make sure that it does not deflate as much. So the question is really, how do we secure hydrogen expectations right now? And to underpin this a bit, I show results from one paper of last year that we did at PIC, mainly like led by Adrian Odenweiler. And here we illustrate, this picture illustrates nicely the recent wave that we had with respect to hydrogen expectations. What can be seen here is electrolysis capacity announced to be realized by 2024. And you can from different points in time. And what you can see here, I hope you see my mouse a bit. In 2021, there were 6 gigawatts globally announced, and then these announcements, they increased to up to 12.5 gigawatts. But when approaching that year 2024, and especially in hindsight, only a fraction of this was installed. And we have been tracking those projects, most like with respect to where they are and what sectors there are. We don't know the specific reasons, like we didn't assess them in that study, but I have other work that is underpinning why many projects disappeared and a substantial share was delayed. But this is basically the third wave that we're in, and I take this a bit further by using a concept called Gardner hype cycles applied to hydrogen. And the Gardner hype cycle basically say that it's quite typical with new innovation, with new technology, that they go through such a cycle where there is a peak of inflated expectations. And I think that is what we have been seeing with respect to hydrogen, especially like put forward by one poll in the debate that saw hydrogen as a quite universal solution to many problems, an energy carrier or feedstock that is used across sectors and basically replaces today's oil, replaces today's natural gas, where science is quite clear that this is not the case. Russell mentioned already that science clearly prioritizes, especially energy system and scenario research, prioritizes certain sectors that we can speak about later for hydrogen, and discourages the use in especially in residential heating and road transport. And right now we're probably here because hydrogen turned out to be more expensive and progress is slow and due to other sectors. And now the big risk is that this happens basically. And what could lead there is that now the focus turns rather to other options that are not yet mature, options like CCS, that basically crowd out hydrogen funding, crowd out attention. And so the big challenge is to stabilizing hydrogen expectations and the entire system. And I mentioned at the end of my presentation now 3 items that I think are crucial to doing that. And the first one is that we need a clear long-term vision. Despite all the uncertainty, we need a clear long-term vision that can be adjusted, but still we need it. Where do we want to use hydrogen? Where is it produced? Where is it transported? In what sectors is it used? And we need a robust stepwise plan to getting there. And with that, I mean mostly policymakers in conjunction with other societal actors, especially industry. And one key item of this is infrastructure planning, of course, and the question of what are we importing in the end. And then we need to be clear that this requires public budget spent in support policies on the one hand, and on the other hand, that requires credible climate commitment. If we weaken the EU ETS, the case for hydrogen clearly weakens as well. Hydrogen is, unlike heat pumps, unlike electric vehicles, it's in most sectors nothing that becomes competitive without carbon pricing. So if you weaken carbon pricing, you weaken the case, and investment security, you weaken as well. And the third one is a key thing that I want to stress. Our industrial production, will it rely on hydrogen, especially in steel and ammonia, or will it import ammonia, or will it import green iron to today's sites? And with that could be a German or an Austrian perspective. And the question here is, are there good friendshoring scenarios where we pool our resources EU-wide, or are we even importing from worldwide, and what are we importing? Or are we transforming all the sites towards hydrogen where there are now? Key questions to be answered, has huge infrastructure implications. that's it from my side for now.
Thank you very much, Falco, for your presentation. And we will now move on to Dr. Eva Schmidt. She's Director of Hydrogen and Synthetic Energy Carriers at the German Energy Agency, DENA. And yeah, we are looking forward to your presentation without slides, as mentioned.
Yeah. Thank you very much. So actually, I'm Director Hydrogen and Resilience since a year. So to update also to the current situation. So the question of the webinar is from ambition to reality, what role should hydrogen play in the energy transition, right? And so ambition, I would say, came mainly from these calculation exercises based on the models and the theoretical idea, basically, to go to carbon neutrality. What role should hydrogen play? We've already heard about this. So I think we have the very interesting case that in this model setting, basically, all the policy instruments are in place. We have, as we just heard from Falco already, the carbon pricing that's necessary. We have implicit through the mathematical logic of a model, basically, a solver that says what needs to happen. And this ambition setting to reality is exactly and precisely that we do not have that, right? So in reality, we do not automatically have all these mechanisms at play. And the big question is how to get them. That's the policy making. We know with hydrogen, or we have always known that it solves a small number of tricky problems, especially one is towards the later years of carbon neutrality. How do we solve the winters with wind and solar electricity? And the idea was always that hydrogen could be stored basically in summertime during overproduction caverns and then used for electric production in the wintertime. And that's a very massive infrastructure investment. You need the grid for this. In Germany, with the Kernnetz, we have that setting in place, and it was specifically also the dimension of it to a very large extent are responding to exactly that problem. So how large does this grid need to be? Where does it need to go in order to deliver stable electricity in challenging winter times in 2040, 2045? And also you need the caverns to transform the gas caverns to hydrogen caverns in order to operationalize this idea. And I would say that we're massively before time basically here because the lead time for this infrastructure investment is very long. That's how the technology works. But so what we've set up now is to solve this future problem. And the policy instruments are not the same way in place to actually incentivize this. And that's what we're struggling with at the moment because the CO2 prices are nowhere where they need to be for these technologies or these investments to be in the money, and also the risk. So taking care of there's a lot of different risks involved. So if you're having the investment decision for building a gas cavern, for example, to refurbishing a gas cavern to a hydrogen cavern, there's loads of different risks that a bank would like to see accommodated for, basically, which they are not at the moment. So I would say that, this framing that Falco just showed that we're somewhere in the end of the third wave, that's how your graph suggested this, is in a way, probably historically, we have installed more megawatt of hydrogen capacity than before. So this was an ambition and then an relative to expectation graph. I would say if we only look at reality, it's the first wave that starts. So we have at the moment 0.2 gigawatt installed in Germany. This is expected to rise to 0.9 this year. With investments that are already being built, and financing is ensured for up to 2.4 gigawatt until 2030. That's what our database shows. So we are compiling a project database since a couple of years already. And we see with that, and also in the process of talking always to the project agents, basically, is that financing is the main challenge. And here, something like this quota instrument that we have now installed in Germany really helps. This is for the transport sector, the quota instrument. So it doesn't respond to the issue that I just mentioned with the electricity generation in not sunny and not windy periods. But yeah, it's a way to show that there, or to incentivize demand, basically. And that will be the main challenge for policy making in the next period. How to incentivize demand, basically, because we have very much thought about this as a push problem, basically, and there's no pull for hydrogen enough so that this is actually a market, so that there's actually offtake and that banks actually finance this. So in order to understand better what needs to be done, I think these investment calculations should be what the main area to look at, basically, because the logic that the banks pursue is the logic that needs to be solved. So thank you very much so much from my side.
Yeah, thank you, Eva, for your presentation or your input. We will now, maybe before we move on, just a quick reminder to the audience. Please feel free to post questions in the Q&A. We have 2 presentations left, and afterwards, we want to discuss the different challenges and aspects that have been raised so far. We are happy to take your questions. And we will now move on to Dr. Boris Krey, probably. He's a member of the executive board of the Association of the Swiss Gas Industry, VSG, where he's head of the Energy Economics and Policy Division. And I actually will share his slides. Just give me a second. Hopefully it works. And the floor is yours, Boris.
Yeah, thank you very much for the introduction, and hello to everybody here. I'm happy to show you some views on the Swiss market. I know it's a bit more specific. Before I start, I just want to explain who the association is in 1 or 2 sentences. The association covers around 100 members. It's not on the slide here. But we have around 100 members, and the members are all gas network operators, and we cover more than 95% of the Swiss gas market in terms of the gas network operation coverage. So if we start, you can go to the next slide, Michael. Thank you. As I said, I zoom into the Swiss case from an industrial point of view. And also look at the policy and the political issues that combine it. We have a federal hydrogen strategy that got published in December 2024, quite late compared to other European countries. We've been waiting for a very long time for that, and it came in 2024, in the end of 2024. It's a very passive strategy, a very I wouldn't say realistic. Well, it is realistic, but it's a very mild, passive, wait and see strategy. It has some positive signs. It looks at the possible imports via the European hydrogen backbone. It's outlining that this might be possible by 2035. But mainly, it's a strategy that sees the government as a facilitating role, as a subsidiary role, setting the framework, but leaves all decision-making, all the investment, all financing, all the risk-taking to the industry. And looking at demand and the supply side, demand in terms of the official data, if you look at the government, it goes in line with the strategy. They are very pessimistic about demand in Switzerland. They see this between 3 to 10 terawatt hours, but they're closer to the 3 terawatt hour than the 10 terawatt hours. So they don't really see a lot of demand for hydrogen in Switzerland. And it's also like one of the reasons why that is the case. It's the framework, the approach that the government takes. It's more like looking at an electrification first view, saying that everything that can be technically electrified should be electrified, and then there will be a few areas which are hard to abate sectors, and maybe possibly those could be supplied by hydrogen. We, on the other side, the gas industry, we take a slightly different view on that. A more market-driven economic view. We say if we are able to get hold of competitive hydrogen prices, if that is possible, if we get hold of that, for example, with the European hydrogen backbone and cheap supply and contracts, then we see that in fact demand can exceed 40 terawatt hours. So like it can be by 2050. So in saying that, we see areas not only hard to abate areas, but also like in taking as an example, industrial sectors, even those like areas where a substitution is easily possible today, going to electricity. Maybe if hydrogen becomes a competitive energy source, then and a reliable energy source, maybe this can compete and will be a better choice than to fully electrify. So you can go to the next slide, Michael. Hydrogen, where does it make sense? To summarize it a little bit, like if the price is very high, then it will be high temperature industry, chemicals, feedstock, seasonal storage, aviation, maybe in terms of CCUS, that hydrogen can be combined with carbon capture. But if the price is low, then it becomes a very competitive source. It can compete with easy to substitute with electricity markets, industrial areas. And we do see a purpose and a good cause that it can play a role in diversifying the energy mix and improve the security of supply. The Swiss-specific challenge, maybe to outline that as well. I was very excited to hear Eva Schmidt saying how the hydrogen production increases over the next few, like this year, and over the next few years up to 2.4 terawatt hours, if I heard this correctly. Switzerland is far away from this. Like, we are very limited in terms of domestic production potential. We are very strongly dependent on imports, and particularly over the European hydrogen backbone. And then coming to the last slide, I see time runs so fast here. The last slide, maybe the view that we try, or like what the association is also pressing for, is to keep our doors open in the future discussion. We see that the hydrogen backbone is still like an eventuality. We don't know whether it comes or not. We need to see, like, financing is a big issue in Switzerland. It's not different to other countries. We see that in Switzerland, the government perspective is that it should be fully covered by the industrial players, and the government is like very hesitant even to take some form of risk assurance. But here we are in discussions, and here we'll see what role the government will take. But depending on that, and depending on what happens in the European context, we need to make a decision whether we link to the hydrogen backbone or whether we have regional connections to our neighboring countries. And then like a final sentence, we still have to see hydrogen as well as one energy source with other renewable energy sources like biomethane. And we need to see this in an integrated energy system perspective, where particular hydrogen plays a role in electrification, but thermal energy storage provision, and to ensure security of supply and diversification of our energy sources. So sorry that I rushed through the slides now, but yeah. more or less on time.
Yeah, thank you, Boris, for your input. No worries, we have some time left also for the next or the last presentation, and then also for the discussion. So the last presentation will be given by Daniel Bischofberger. He's CEO of Acceleron, a global leader in turbocharging fuel injection and digital solutions for marine and energy industries. So we are looking forward to your input, Daniel.
Thank you, Michael. I hope you see the screen, the slide, and you hear me?
Yes, perfect.
Okay, thanks for the introduction and good morning, everyone. And also thanks for having me. We built the ships that are ready for e-fuels, but the fuels did not come. And we've interviewed 50 leaders in marine and energy and finance to understand why the e-fuels are not coming. My short presentation is summarizing the results. So the global maritime committed to net zero by 2050, and maritime decarbonization follows the three paths: efficiency, so emission reduction for many years to reduce fossil fuels, CO2, but also for the e-fuels economy later, because those fuels are pretty expensive and we have to be careful with those resources. Transition fuels such as LNG and biofuel will buy time. However, LNG is not carbon neutral and biofuel is not scalable. So we might gain 10 to 15 years of additional moderate decarbonization. And by 2035 and 40, we need carbon neutral fuels at scale to reach net zero by 2050. The catch, it needs 5 to 10 years to build. We have to start building it now. So where are we now? We all know global warming exceeded 1.5 degrees, at least in 24. Shipping emissions are at a record high. Growth of maritime is outpacing decarbonization efforts, and there's a lot. At the same time, we are building ships that are ready for alternative fuels, such as e-methanol and e-ammonia, which is the future fuel for shipping. But the e-fuels are missing, so majority goes to LNG. And the delay of IMO net zero framework hasn't stopped decarbonization, but it hasn't accelerated. Just for information, the net zero framework would be the global regulatory framework to ensure shipping to reach net zero by 2050. So we built it, they didn't come. Why? Order books show the decline in alternative fuel capable vessels at the end of 25 from 50 to 38, and as said, LNG. Mainly because the ships which are ready for e-fuels are running on conventional fuels. And why the hell to invest in those ships when the fuel isn't ready? Shipping needs about 100 to 150 million tons of hydrogen annually, 2 to 3 trillion US dollar. All the hard-to-abate, we already mentioned, 5 to 600 million tons, 9 trillion. But only 38 million tons in pipeline. That's about 6% of the 2050 requirements. So what's stopping e-fuels? So we have identified, based on the interview, 5 deadlocks that stall shipping's energy transition. Number one, fragmented fuel pathways. So too many fuels. Shipping has more than 10 or 13 fuels. At the industry level, it dilutes investments and prevents any fuel from scaling. Geography limits trade flexibility. The production is more central, but there's 5,000 to 6,000 ports globally that have to provide those fuels. Also, we have a deadlock, the finance, $3.5 trillion US dollar ESG capital available, but only around 15 billion US dollar made it to shipping. Building a green hydrogen ecosystem requires long-term commitments, which nobody's willing to give, neither ship owners, nor fuel producers, nor the financial industry. And the deadlock number 4, regulatory alignment gap. So today we all know e-fuels are much more expensive than conventional fossil fuels. The global stick, which is the CO2 tariffs and national carrots, subsidies, incentives are missing. And last but not least, deadlock 5, ports are bottleneck. They have too many investments requests, so they invest in short-to-ship electrification, all the different fuels. But, hold on. Here are all the examples of e-fuel market formation that are underway in some regions. And these are just illustrative examples, not prescription. So one, energy security and decarbonization align. Might sound strange, but countries are moving ahead because reducing fossil fuel dependence and building net zero frameworks, industries follow the same path. integrated national hydrogen and e-fuel strategies around power, heavy industries, and shipping. Cross-sector demand. Singapore, Japan are preparing to import e-ammonia as cargo, first for power generation to reduce CO2 emission while building infrastructure needed for future bunkering. Supply-demand incentives. China is scaling e-fuels, leveraging its large renewable build-out. But go modular, don't build too big. Projects like Envision in China are already producing e-ammonia with a small number of off-takers and expanding in modular phases. And trade corridors, another interesting thing. So the Australia-Asia iron ore corridor is one of the world's largest seaborne commodity routes. We see that where low carbon steel could drive scaled green hydrogen production with e-fuels for shipping. So now I'm coming to an end. So overcoming the deadlock in shipping is cross-sector approach. Why not start with shipping, but with power? Global regulation combined with national hydrogen and e-fuel strategy helps. And by the way, it's happening mainly in Asia Pacific. And here the link to the 2 reports. And also thanks for your attention.
Yes, thank you very much for the presentations so far. We now have some time left for the discussions. And maybe to start, there was one question to Falco's presentation. You already answered it, but I guess not everybody can see it. And I think it's maybe good to clarify this also to the audience. The question was actually, does the assessment of the current state of hydrogen in the Gartner hype cycle or the ambition implementation gap apply primarily to Germany and Europe? Does it possibly look different from a global perspective? So maybe you can briefly answer this question for the audience, Falco.
Yes. When you look at the projects and project expectations or announcements and then failure rates and delay, like roughly this is has been a global phenomenon. We observed it in the EU for several reasons. Like one universal reason is obviously cost decline didn't happen as fast as we hoped for, but then of course also debates about regulation that took longer because they were very political. But then of course the whole coordination aspect of infrastructure and support policies. For the US, I don't have to say much, I guess, like with scrapping the IRA and in the current atmosphere, there is like investment uncertainty increased so much, like, and then also for global projects, for other global projects that especially eyed at exports, there were delays, but China might make big moves there because there are some big projects being built, for instance, with respect to green methanol for the chemical sector, for the fuel sector, partly for export, where a big country like China that can secure big investments might take a different route than the EU with a much more fragmented approach in terms of policies and sectors.
Yeah, thank you very much, Falco. Maybe one question from my side to somewhat also summarize some aspects of the different presentations. So as far as understood, there is currently a lack of demand, which may partly be driven by the lack of infrastructure, but also due to, of course, the high costs of green hydrogen. So actually, my question would be, how can we bridge the gap between what consumers are willing to pay or the willingness to pay for green hydrogen and the production costs of renewable hydrogen in the moment and also for the future? So what regulatory tools do you see as options here? And so maybe I would give this question first to Eva, as you mentioned that we have the models and scenarios in place, but there's actually a policy implementation problem at the moment. So what would you see as regulatory tools actually to drive demand and also close the gap between the willingness to pay and the production costs?
I would say that the basic tool that most people forget to mention every time they speak is CO2 pricing. So if we don't have credible CO2 pricing with political commitment, then I don't see that you can build anything on this, basically. So that's the fundamental part. And then if you look in the German budget, there's a table somewhere on the very long document. You can find a table with the 30 most cost-intensive individual measures of the last years. And there's 3 lines related to hydrogen in this. So I would say that in the German budget, a lot of money has already been put to hydrogen. And if you look at the state as a whole, there's a lot of issues the state needs to solve, from hospitals to whatever it is, pensions and so on and so forth. So a very overproportionate amount of money, I would say, amount of money has already been invested into hydrogen, given that we're solving a very important problem of the future. I think it has its right to be there, basically, but the opportunity costs of this investment basically is high. And you need to explain this to the general public. So I would say, looking at the budget of the next years, it's becoming much, much tighter. So there is a report that says that for 2027, only 3% of the German budget can still be negotiated, basically. The rest is already bound into measures already. There is because the classical answer to your question is, well, we need to do something like CFDs or invest state money, basically. But I would say that we might as well not debate these policy instruments that much, because we have been there and there is simply not that much state money to invest, because in also other areas like defense spending and so on has been increased a lot, and there is a current threat that is much more early in the timeline than climate change impacts, basically, and policy always responds to the most urgent threat, basically. Yeah. So household neutral policy instruments is what is currently has any chance of being realized. And here, as we have seen already, the quota is obviously a very good tool because it is entirely household neutral. But there's limits to what household neutrality can actually deliver, because the risk profiles I mentioned earlier are sometimes real risks that only governments basically can take on. There's not really any other actor in the ecosystem that could take on such large risks. And yeah, there need to be long-term decisions or decisions with long-term focus that need to be pursued, and that's challenging.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you very much. Maybe I'd like to forward this question to Boris, also to have the Swiss perspective here. As you mentioned, Boris, the Swiss government actually expects that the industry will carry most, or actually all the risks, the investment risks. So what regulatory tools are then actually discussed in Switzerland to ramp up demand and the hydrogen economy?
I think the current discussion is, in fact, like how to deal with the risk to shoulder such an enormous investment into the infrastructure. Like we have like a gas pipeline going through Switzerland, the transit gas pipeline, which about almost 90% of the content is determined for foreign markets. So like the stream goes from Northern Europe to Italy and the other way around. We have a reverse flow as well. And this pipeline is crucial. I mean, obviously crucial for some of it for the Swiss market, but even more crucial in a way for the European market. So saying that, this pipeline is very helpful to amend or to alter it to be of use for the European hydrogen backbone, for example, and to take or play a major part in the provision of hydrogen in Europe. So the question is like how to deal with such a risky project. And as I mentioned before, the Swiss government is very hesitant in terms of taking their own risks. It's also like the question, what role should other countries play, like you have Italy or Northern Europe, who also could benefit. Could they take part in the investment in such an infrastructure? This is like a question which is also raised. But I think that an important message, or like an important thing that we discuss currently is to differentiate between investment into the pipeline and taking the risk if the hydrogen world, as we might anticipate it in the future, if this doesn't really turn out into reality. And I think the industry really is very much focused on the risk. What happens if it doesn't work out? And doing the investment and getting the pipeline system ready. The industry, the Swiss industry, is very willing to take that. To take those investment decisions on their own hands. It's only the question of the risk. So, to cut this story short, sorry, it's important to find a way to shoulder the risk on fair terms. Because to my knowledge, and this could also be like a question in the round, I think there's no European country which would like to or invest into hydrogen and into the infrastructure that does not get some form of support by the government. I think this is a very unique way and path that Switzerland is currently looking at, and I think this needs to be challenged.
Yeah, thank you very much. I guess, Russell, you want to add to the current debate?
Yes, thanks. I just want to add to what the colleagues were saying. I mean, not so much specifically on the policy dimension, but just to emphasize this uncertainty and the risk when we're talking about trying to create demand and match that to supply, because the missing link or the weakest link in the chain is the infrastructure, right? It's about the pipelines and to match both sides of the equation. And I think that's one of the major problems. On the one hand, as Boris mentioned, we've got infrastructure that in principle could be made hydrogen ready, but it's a massive investment and a massive commitment. On the other hand, we have an extensive gas infrastructure across Europe, in Switzerland and elsewhere, that could be used if hydrogen is upgraded to methane. So, but there's additional cost and inefficiencies involved in doing that. So there's a question around commitment to an infrastructure that is a natural monopoly infrastructure, and going one way or another, like a chicken-egg situation. And no one wants to make the first move because of the risk and the uncertainty, but it's a sort of infrastructure technology commitment that provides a certain amount of lock-in that is sort of prohibiting development there. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I guess, Daniel, you also want to add to the debate. Maybe also, I think in your presentation, what I found interesting is actually that you called for a global perspective for regulating the ramp up. So maybe you can add also from this perspective. I guess you have the Swiss perspective, but also rather the global perspective based on your expertise.
Thank you, Michael. So first of all, I agree, we need some stick and carrots. It doesn't work without. But again, I want to emphasize, we talk about risk and whatever, but I know China pretty well. And we thought, why is China moving this way? Why are they so strong in renewables? Why are they so strong in photovoltaic? Why they are so strong in battery cars? Very simple, they don't want to depend on anything from fossil fuels. And we see now the Middle East crisis now gives them right. So it's a risk to move into that one, but it's also a risk to be dependent on fossil fuel. So all that one, and don't believe China is doing that just because they want to dominate. They want to be independent at the lowest cost, and they know they need to subsidize. I mean, I was talking to the one who are producing that one and selling the ammonia. I said, I mean, how the hell? It's almost close to diesel. How do you do it? I said, price and cost don't correlate. But that's okay. I mean, we have to jumpstart, we have to get the costs down, and we use our own markets with 1.3 billion of people to drive the competition. Sometimes they get it out of their hand on the battery cost, but nevertheless, we want to be independent of the lowest cost. And now we can debate, or we just can watch China doing the whole thing. And they will say, by the way, at the end, when we have enough, you need some hydrogen. We have it pretty low in price. And then we complain about dominance. So here we have to be aware there's a risk of not doing it either. And also on the shipping, we see, and especially when it comes to end users, like IKEA, I mean, Nike, they already insist on CO2 carbon neutral transport because, the transport is little compared to that one. It's clear to commodity, it's a more expensive thing. And whether the countries in Africa can afford to pay 20% more. But, whether Nike shoe now costs 100 or 150 cents, nobody really cares. So that's a bit my statement here. We have to be also aware of the opportunity cost when not doing. And I agree, the countries have to do something, but also here we see what's going on.
Yeah, thank you very much. I guess this is also an argument supporting the urgency, I would say. So there is one person in the audience that emphasizes the urgency of the topic. So it's not a topic of the far future, but already a topic of today. Maybe Eva, you want to react to this comment, but I would add one question also to you, because actually you mentioned that for Germany, actually hydrogen was seen in a way that it could be used or can be used for seasonal balancing, so based on the kernets and together with hydrogen storage. So that there is, of course, a massive upfront infrastructure investment needed. But my question here would be, so infrastructure can be seen as a precondition, but it's at the same time currently a bottleneck for the ramp up of the hydrogen economy. And so I would be interested in your view how the associated coordination problem can be solved or is solved in Germany. And then maybe also to the other speakers, what your perspective on the coordination problem here is. I guess, Boris, you also mentioned the pipelines to be built in your area.
Thanks. I can be really brief on this. So just to comment on also the disagreement with me that that this is a problem of the future versus now. I totally think that this is a problem already now, or it's a locked-in problem and we need to solve it now, right? I did not refer, or when I said that this is not perceived as a problem now, I took on the perspective of policymakers, because the problem hydrogen solves, or the emission problem, is from the perspective of a state one of many problems. For the perspective of this bubble that is convened here, it's the main problem. That's why we have a career in this, basically solving this problem trajectory. But we need to understand that there's a lot of other problems that need to be solved, and for many policymakers, that's one on a list of 100, basically. And in order to have it solved, we always need to see this perspective and frame the solutions in a way that makes sense, basically, in this array of problems. We can choose to ignore this and say, well, but it is the most important problem, but then we just don't get further, because then we just don't get funding or whatever it is. So that's how I meant this remark, basically, how this problem is perceived. Regarding your question with the famous chicken and egg problem, as it is called, I'm kind of done with this framing, because I've heard this phrase way too often. It's still true in general, but I would say in Germany this problem is largely solved, because we have decided for a kernets, we have the mechanism in place, and the most urgent problem we have is that nobody's buying the hydrogen. So we have an off-taker problem. We don't have any kind of infrastructure problem at the moment. And plus, for building the infrastructure, the bank wants to see offtake, right? So they lend money for building a pipeline only if there's offtake. So we don't have an infrastructure problem here, because we have done our homework. We have an offtake problem, and for offtake, we need to solve the riddle how why should anybody invest in hydrogen if it's not competitive, right? Because if a company invests now or buys hydrogen and meanwhile could provide an energy service with other means much cheaper, then it's just doing a decision that drives this company into bankruptcy. So it's actually a very sane thing that companies don't buy the hydrogen at the moment. So that's the problem we need to solve. To adapt this, and then we can do it on the time dimension, so pushing things further to the past. Basically, that's what also in this grid development process with the Kernet has happened. So it has been pushed into the future. Or we could put more money on this. I've already commented on this. Or we could increase pressure, as in with quotas in a household neutral way, and so on and so forth. But still, we need to deal with the fact that hydrogen is more expensive than we assumed it to be in the calculations that I mentioned in the very first place.
Thank you very much. I guess, Falco, you want to add?
Yeah, I would disagree with the formulation simply of that we do not have an infrastructure problem, but mainly an offtake problem in the following sense. Like, to solve the off-taker problem, you need coordination. You need to be quite clear. You need a strategy as a policymaker of where you want to have offtake, which sectors, which locations mainly. And then the infrastructure can like follow. Like first you have the offtakes for in a couple of years, and then depending on whether it's repurposing or newly built infrastructure, then that can translate into infrastructure. But there's no clear path. I mentioned two examples with respect to offtakes. Like right now, much of the infrastructure and much of the capacity that you mentioned, Eva, is coming from refineries. And they are pushed through our GHG quota, I call it now in English. And I want, like, on the one hand, that's good because we have some offtake and we have some electrolysis in the system, and we reach a fraction of the German targets, the 10 gigawatt target through that. And on the other hand, that's not the transformative kind of green hydrogen as a climate change mitigation options that we want. It's using a tiny bit of hydrogen to make fossil fuels cleaner, and this is not really transformative. It helps the system to learn a bit, but it's like I would even dare to say it's a dead end. And that needs to be solved. The other big question is the power sector, as you alluded to. If much of the big core grid was planned for the power sector, but the power sector does not have the offtake yet, which translates then into the core network not progressing as planned. And there is a cluster risk that we get stuck with this infrastructure because it's a huge plan, and there are some remaining risks if the offtakes don't come, that like the big lines required for several applications are not being built because of that.
Yeah, thank you very much. Looking at the time, I would like to raise one further question, which I guess is a very important question about import security. I would like to rephrase the question raised by Prodia. So is the EU truly strengthening its energy security through sustainability, so through green hydrogen, or merely replacing one external dependency with another through green hydrogen imports? I guess, Boris, you mentioned that for Switzerland there is a quite high import dependency due to low production potential in Switzerland. So maybe giving the question to you, how is this aspect actually discussed in the Swiss debate?
Yeah, I mean, this is most certainly an issue. If you look at countries that could supply green hydrogen to very low costs, we look at countries like Oman, we look at countries like India, maybe South America. So not necessarily like very democratic countries, and this is part of the discussion and gets raised. Like, where's the hydrogen coming from? But I think this is cutting too short. And I think looking at potential, like even within Europe, we see that there's a massive potential as well to produce hydrogen in Europe. And it's also like showing that you can diversify very well. Like there are dozens and more of countries which could compete in supplying green hydrogen. I think getting from one dependency to the other, I don't necessarily see this in terms of the countries, and it's also like also adding that it's also like a different sort of fuel source, like in terms of like if you compare this to fossil fuel, I think we are more limited. So I think I don't really. I think the issue is fair enough and needs to be addressed, but I don't see a long run problem here.
Yeah, thank you very much. Maybe to somewhat summarize the webinar. So I think we initially raised the question, what role should hydrogen realistically play in the energy transition? And actually, I liked your slide, Boris, where you showed a scenario where the price of hydrogen is high and then one where the price is low. But you actually did not mention what scenario may be realistic from your view. But maybe we can somehow summarize so everybody can briefly say what his view is on these two scenarios. So, do you expect a decrease in prices of hydrogen so that there would be a broad usage of hydrogen in different sectors, or do you expect that also in the far future this will be still a scarcity resource, so that we will have to allocate it to distinct sectors, hard to debate sectors? So maybe Russell can start as a first presenter. What is your view on these two scenarios?
Good question. I can't remember the exact slide, but I can have a go at an answer. I mean, I think the two price pressures that we expect to see. So on the supply side for hydrogen, or in various forms, we expect to see a continued digression, economies of scale as we scale up and sort of costs going down. Certainly as most of these technologies scale up and reach higher TRL levels. On the competition side, I mean, we were talking before about the CO2 price that needs to be much higher than it is, and there is an expectation also there that there's a fossil-based hydrogen will become a lot more expensive. So in both directions, I would expect to see that, and also in the coming years. Somehow also exacerbated by recent geopolitical events. I mean, we've had much of that in recent years, and it's ongoing present. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Falco, what is your view on these two scenarios?
There are some locations where you have super cheap hydrogen. I mentioned the Stegra steel plant in Boden, Luleå, northern Sweden, where the problem is that you don't get the cheap hydrogen from there to Central Europe, but you get the green iron to Central Europe. So green iron, green steel, I think produced at such locations has the chance of becoming competitive soon. And like for the best pockets, even now competing with like fossil-based steel. I want to note we have an overcapacity globally, so the market's under stress, but these are competitive pockets. Replacing natural gas long-term still will require, like I say will, but likely requires a CO2 price of 300 to 400 euro per ton of CO2. That is the current estimates. There were lower estimates, Hydrogen Council, McKinsey, but I think no one really believes in like a broad infrastructure with prices that low. Therefore, I'm very much on the side of push the other options, electrify, also industrial heat, also high temperatures. And then, I mean, we still learn in the process. Right now, we do not manage to doing the first step. I don't want to close those sectors. There will be enough, like the transition to electrification has its own barriers. There will be enough markets if we find that hydrogen will be cheap in the end. But like for the first step, we have to focus to then learn how cheap hydrogen can get.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you very much. And then maybe Eva, do you want to add to this two views?
I don't have to add. I think everything has been said.
Okay, that's fine. And Boris, I guess you already mentioned it in your presentation, these two scenarios. So due to the timing, I would say that we close this webinar for today. We already lost Daniel. He had to leave due to another meeting. So thank you very much for joining this webinar, and also thank you very much to all the speakers for presenting your views and discussing with us. And maybe we will see in another webinar, maybe also further discussing the hydrogen topic. So yeah, have a nice afternoon. See you then.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.